The radio crackled with static at 3:47 hours, somewhere over the Hindu Kush mountains of Afghanistan. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reaper Valdez pressed his headset tighter against his ear, straining to hear through the interference. The last transmission from Angel 7 had been garbled, incomplete. Something about coordinates, something about going dark. Angel 7, this is Neptune Base, how copy? Valdez's voice carried the weight of 12 years leading SEAL team operations, but tonight something felt different. Wrong. The C-130 Hercules transport aircraft had been their lifeline for the past 8 months, ferrying supplies and personnel across the most dangerous airspace in the region. But Angel 7 wasn't just any transport crew. The pilot had earned a reputation that preceded her wherever she flew. Some called her reckless, others called her brilliant. Most just called her Ghost, because of her uncanny ability to appear and disappear from radar screens like smoke. Staff Sergeant Kaya Ghost Thorne had been flying military aircraft for 7 years, but her record told a story that most of her male counterparts preferred to ignore. 3 confirmed saves of downed aircraft crews, 17 successful high-risk extractions, 0 losses under her command. Yet somehow, she was still relegated to cargo runs while less experienced pilots got the glory missions. Tonight was supposed to be routine. A simple resupply dropped to forward operating base Viper, tucked deep in Taliban-controlled territory. The kind of mission the brass handed to pilots they wanted to keep busy but not necessarily successful. The kind of mission that was beneath the attention of the real warriors. But routine had just died with that last transmission. Valdez studied the radar screen, watching as Angel 7's transponder signal flickered weakly against the green backdrop. The aircraft was flying lower than regulation, hugging the mountain peaks in a way that made his stomach clench. Whatever was happening up there, it wasn't part of the flight plan. "Sir," his radio operator, Petty Officer Martinez, looked up from his console with troubled eyes. "I'm picking up multiple aircraft signatures, fast movers. They're not ours." The command center fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant rumble of generators. Through the reinforced windows, the pre-dawn darkness stretched endlessly toward mountains that had swallowed too many good soldiers. Valdez felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders. Somewhere in that darkness, a cargo plane with 6 souls aboard was flying blind into what might be their final mission. And for reasons he couldn't yet understand, he found himself hoping that the pilot they'd all underestimated might just be the one person capable of bringing them home. The radio hissed with empty static, waiting for a voice that might never come. Kaya Thorne had grown up in the shadow of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where her father worked as a maintenance chief, and her mother served as a flight nurse. She'd learned to distinguish aircraft by engine sound before she could tie her shoes, could identify a C-130's distinctive whine from 3 miles away on a clear day. But it wasn't until she was 16 and saw her first female pilot that she understood her own destiny. The path hadn't been easy. Flight school was brutal enough without the added burden of proving herself worthy of an aircraft that some instructors believed belonged exclusively to men. She'd endured the comments, the deliberate scheduling conflicts, the equipment malfunctions that somehow only affected her flights. But she'd also developed something her critics hadn't expected, an almost supernatural ability to read the sky. Tonight, that ability was screaming warnings. The Hindu Kush mountains rose like jagged teeth against the star-filled sky, their peaks shrouded in wisps of cloud that danced in the thin air. Kaya's C-130 droned steadily eastward at 12,000 feet, her 4 turboprop engines maintaining perfect synchronization despite the turbulence that rattled the cargo hold behind her. "Ghost, you seeing this weather report?" Her co-pilot, Captain Jake Morrison, tapped his weather radar display with concern. Morrison was good people, one of the few who'd never questioned her competence or her right to be in the left seat. "I see it," Kaya replied, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. The radar showed a storm system moving in from the northwest, but that wasn't what worried her. 3 small contacts had appeared on the edge of her screen 15 minutes ago, maintaining a parallel course exactly 2 miles to the south. No flight plan, no radio contact, no transponder signals. In this part of Afghanistan, unidentified aircraft meant only one thing. Neptune Base, this is Angel 7, she transmitted, keeping her voice level. Request immediate vector change to alternate route Bravo 4. Weather's looking dicey on our current heading. The response was immediate but disappointing. Angel 7, Neptune Base, negative on route change. Maintain current heading and altitude. Viper needs those supplies by 600. Kaya exchanged glances with Morrison. They both knew the real reason for the denied request. Their cargo hold contained medical supplies and ammunition for a forward operating base that had been under siege for 3 days. Wounded soldiers were counting on them, but flying straight into what looked like an ambush wasn't going to help anyone. "Copy Neptune Base," she replied, then switched to intercom. "Jake, start running through emergency procedures, all of them." Behind them, the loadmaster and 3 passengers, 2 medics and an intelligence analyst, went about their business, unaware that their pilot was calculating survival odds with every passing mile. The unknown contacts were closing distance. 23 minutes later, the first missile launch lit up the night sky like a deadly firework, and Kaya Thorne's reputation was about to be tested in the most violent way possible. The SA-7 surface-to-air missile carved a brilliant orange arc through the darkness, its heat signature blooming across Kaya's threat warning display like a malevolent flower. The lock-on tone filled the cockpit with its urgent, ear-piercing shriek. "Missile launch! Missile launch!" Morrison's voice cracked with adrenaline as his hands flew across the defensive systems panel. "Deploying flares, chaff away." Kaya didn't respond with words. Her hands moved with practiced precision, throwing the C-130 into a violent banking turn that pressed the crew against their restraints with crushing force. The massive transport aircraft, designed for cargo, not combat, groaned in protest as she pushed it beyond normal operational limits. The first missile streaked past their port wingtip, confused by the shower of burning magnesium flares that Morrison had released into the slipstream. But Kaya's threat display was already painting new contacts. More missiles inbound. "Angel 7, Angel 7, the radio exploded with Neptune Base's frantic calls. "We're showing multiple missile launches in your vicinity. What's your status?" Kaya wrestled with the controls as another SA-7 detonated close enough to pepper their tail section with shrapnel. Warning lights cascaded across her instrument panel like Christmas decorations from hell. Hydraulic pressure dropping. Engine number 3 showing temperature spikes, but they were still flying. "Neptune Base, Angel 7 is taking fire," she transmitted while simultaneously initiating another evasive maneuver that made the aircraft shudder. "Multiple SAMs inbound. Request immediate close air support." "Negative, Angel 7. No assets available in your sector. You're on your own." The words hit like physical blows. No fighter cover. No rescue helicopters standing by. Just a cargo plane, its crew, and whatever miracles Kaya could pull from the thin mountain air. "Jake, how's our fuel?" she called over the roar of wind through a hole that shrapnel had torn in the cargo door. 70% and dropping fast," Morrison replied, his face pale in the instrument glow. "That last near-miss punctured something. We're leaving a vapor trail." Behind them, the loadmaster was shouting reports about cabin pressure and structural damage. One of the medics was unconscious, blood streaming from a head wound where debris had struck him. The intelligence analyst was praying in what sounded like 3 different languages. Another missile launch flared to life, this one from directly ahead. Kaya had perhaps 10 seconds to decide whether to climb, dive, or try something that would either save them all or kill them instantly. She chose the impossible. The C-130 Hercules wasn't built for aerobatic maneuvers. Its designers had prioritized cargo capacity and reliability over agility, creating an aircraft that was about as nimble as a flying warehouse. But Kaya Thorne had spent 7 years learning every rivet, every wire, every structural limit of her aircraft. She knew exactly how far she could push before physics took over. She put the nose down and dove. The massive transport plummeted toward the mountain peaks like a four-engine meteor, its airspeed indicator climbing past redline as Kaya traded altitude for velocity. The missile, programmed to intercept a steady target, couldn't adjust quickly enough to the sudden change in trajectory. It streaked overhead, its proximity fuse triggering harmlessly in empty air. "Pull up, pull up!" Morrison's voice was lost in the screaming of overstressed engines and the metallic groaning of the airframe. The mountain ridge rushed toward them with terrifying speed, its snow-covered peaks sharp enough to cut the darkness. Kaya waited until the last possible moment, then hauled back on the yoke with every ounce of strength she possessed. The C-130 responded sluggishly, its nose rising just enough to clear the ridgeline by less than 50 feet. Snow kicked up by their passage filled the air like a blizzard, temporarily blinding anyone watching from below. "Jesus Christ, Ghost," Morrison breathed, his knuckles white on the armrests. "I can't believe that worked." But Kaya wasn't celebrating yet. Her fuel gauge showed critical levels. She had wounded crew members, and they were still deep in hostile territory with no backup coming. Worse, her radio was picking up Taliban chatter on multiple frequencies. They'd stirred up a hornet's nest, and every insurgent fighter within 50 miles would be converging on their position. "Jake, plot me a course to the nearest friendly airfield," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "And see if you can raise anyone on guard frequency. We need to let someone know we're still alive." As Morrison worked frantically with charts and navigation equipment, Kaya stole a glance at her threat display. Clean for the moment, but that wouldn't last long. The Taliban had more missiles, and they'd learned from the first attack. Next time, they'd coordinate better, attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Next time, even she might not be able to dance her way out of the trap. But for now, they were flying. Damaged, bleeding fuel and carrying wounded, but flying. And as long as the engines kept turning and the wings stayed attached, Kaya Thorne would find a way to bring her people home. The emergency frequency crackled with desperate voices as dawn approached over the Hindu Kush. Every radio operator from Kandahar to Bagram was trying to raise Angel 7, but Kaya's comm equipment had taken shrapnel damage during the attack. She could hear incoming transmissions, but her ability to respond was limited to short-range tactical frequencies. "This is any station, she broadcast on 121.5, the international distress frequency. Angel 7 declaring emergency. C-130 with battle damage, 6 souls on board, 2 wounded. Current position approximately 40 miles northwest of Gardez, heading southwest at low altitude. Fuel critical. Request immediate assistance." The response came from an unexpected source, a gravelly voice with a distinct Oklahoma drawl that cut through the static like a blade. "Angel 7, this is Dustoff 3-4. We copy your emergency. Army medevac inbound to your position for medical evacuation. What's the nature of your wounds?" A rescue helicopter. But how had they known? Kaya felt a flicker of hope as she adjusted course toward the voice coordinates the pilot was transmitting. "Dustoff 3-4, Angel 7. We have one unconscious crew member with head trauma and multiple personnel with minor lacerations from shrapnel, but we're not sure we can make it to a suitable landing zone. Fuel state is critical, and we're still taking ground fire sporadically." "Copy that, Ghost." The helicopter pilot used her call sign with a familiarity that surprised her. "We've been monitoring your situation. There's a suitable LZ about 12 miles southwest of your current position, old Soviet airstrip, mostly intact. Can you make it that far?" Kaya ran quick calculations in her head. Fuel burn rate, distance, wind conditions, the additional drag from their battle damage. It would be close. Impossibly close. Affirm Dustoff, we'll see you there. What she didn't tell the rescue pilot was that her number 3 engine was showing signs of imminent failure. Her hydraulic system was operating on backup pressure alone, and she'd counted at least 7 bullet holes in her port wing during their last evasive maneuver. The C-130 was holding together through stubbornness and prayer, but both were finite resources. Behind her, Morrison was coordinating with their wounded crew members while the loadmaster prepared emergency equipment. The unconscious medic had regained consciousness, but was clearly concussed. The intelligence analyst had stopped praying long enough to help with first aid, proving that desk warriors could show courage when circumstances demanded it. "Ghost," Morrison said quietly, pointing at the fuel gauges. "We're running on fumes, and I'm starting to see irregularities in the engine temperatures." She nodded grimly. They were flying on borrowed time, every mile a gamble against gravity and thermodynamics. But they were still airborne, still making forward progress toward safety. That had to count for something. Ahead, the first faint traces of dawn painted the eastern horizon in shades of gold and crimson. Beautiful and terrible, like everything else in this ancient land of mountains and war. The landing zone appeared through the morning haze exactly where Dustoff 3-4 had promised. A cracked concrete runway carved into a mountain valley, overgrown with weeds but still serviceable. The Soviet engineers who'd built it 40 years earlier had chosen well. It was long enough for a C-130 and positioned to provide natural cover from ground fire. As Kaya lined up for approach, she could see the rescue helicopter waiting like a mechanical guardian angel, its rotors turning lazily in the thin air. Ground personnel moved purposefully around the LZ perimeter. Medics, security teams, maybe even some special operations types who'd appeared from nowhere to provide cover. But landing would be the hardest part. With damaged hydraulics, uncertain fuel flow, and an engine that sounded increasingly unhealthy, she would get exactly one chance to put the aircraft down safely. Angel 7, Dustoff 3-4. Runway is clear, winds are calm, you're cleared for emergency landing. We've got you covered down here. Kaya took a deep breath, flexed her fingers on the controls, and began her final approach to what she hoped wouldn't be her final landing. The C-130 touched down harder than Kaya would have liked, but given the circumstances, any landing they could walk away from qualified as successful. The damaged aircraft rolled to a stop just short of the halfway point on the cracked Soviet runway, its engines winding down with sounds that suggested they'd given everything they had. Emergency vehicles converged on the aircraft before the propellers stopped turning. Medics rushed toward the cargo door while security teams established a defensive perimeter around the landing zone. The efficiency was impressive. Someone had clearly been planning this operation while she'd been fighting for their lives in the sky. Angel 7, this is Colonel James Mitchell, Task Force Commander. A new voice crackled over her radio as she completed shutdown procedures. Outstanding work getting your people to safety. We've got medical and maintenance standing by. Through her side window, Kaya watched stretcher teams efficiently evacuating their wounded crew members. The concussed medic was conscious and arguing with his rescuers, a good sign. The intelligence analyst looked pale but steady as he climbed down from the aircraft, clutching a briefcase like his life depended on it. "Jake," she said to her co-pilot as they completed their post-flight checklist, "remind me never to complain about boring cargo runs again." Morrison managed a weak smile. "Ghost, I've been flying for 12 years, and I've never seen anything like what you just did. That dive to avoid the third missile, the terrain following through those mountain passes. They're going to be talking about this flight at the Academy for decades." But Kaya felt no satisfaction in the compliment. 3 Taliban missiles had come close enough to kill them all, and only luck had prevented the fourth from finding its mark. She'd made tactical decisions based on incomplete information and gotten her crew through by the narrowest of margins. That wasn't skill, that was desperation dressed up in pilot wings. "Ma'am," a voice outside her window interrupted her thoughts. A young Army captain stood beside the aircraft, holding a headset connected to a portable radio unit. "Colonel Mitchell would like to speak with you directly." Kaya climbed down from the cockpit, her legs unsteady after hours of high-stress flying. The mountain air was thin and cold, sharp with the scent of aviation fuel and cordite. In the distance, she could hear the distinctive whoop-whoop-whoop of additional helicopters approaching, probably a larger medical evacuation team or reinforcements for the security perimeter. The captain handed her the headset. "Colonel Mitchell, this is Lieutenant Thorne." "Lieutenant, I've been watching your aircraft's track on our surveillance systems for the past hour. What you accomplished up there was nothing short of miraculous. I'm putting you in for a commendation, and I'm recommending you for immediate transfer to our Special Operations Aviation Unit." The words should have felt like vindication, recognition, proof that she belonged in the cockpit of a military aircraft. Instead, they felt hollow. She'd done what any competent pilot would do, tried to keep her crew alive. The fact that it had worked didn't make her a hero. "Sir, I appreciate the recognition, but I was just doing my job." "Lieutenant," Colonel Mitchell's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Your job tonight saved 6 lives and prevented classified intelligence from falling into enemy hands. That analyst you evacuated was carrying information that could compromise ongoing operations across the entire theater. You didn't just complete a supply run, you prevented a strategic disaster." As if summoned by the colonel's words, the intelligence analyst appeared beside her, still clutching his briefcase. He was younger than she'd expected, probably in his late 20s, with the pale complexion of someone who spent most of his time in windowless rooms studying satellite photographs and intercepted communications. "Lieutenant," he said, extending his hand, "I wanted to thank you personally. The information in this case will save American lives, and without your flying, it would be in Taliban hands right now." The handshake was firm, professional, but Kaya noticed that his hand was trembling slightly, delayed reaction to their near-death experience. She wondered if her own hands were steadier than they felt. Around them, the organized chaos of the rescue operation continued. Her C-130 was surrounded by maintenance personnel who were documenting battle damage and assessing whether the aircraft could be repaired in place or would need to be airlifted out in pieces. The fuel spill beneath the port wing suggested that flying it anywhere would require extensive repairs first. "Colonel," she said into the radio, "what about my aircraft and my crew?" "Your co-pilot and loadmaster will be transported back to Bagram for debriefing and medical evaluation. As for the aircraft, we'll have it flyable again within 48 hours, assuming you're willing to take it home." The question surprised her. Most commanders would assign a fresh crew to ferry the damaged aircraft back to base. The fact that Mitchell was asking her to complete the mission felt significant, though she wasn't sure why. "Sir, if the aircraft is airworthy, I'll fly it." "Outstanding. Get some rest, Lieutenant. You've earned it." As the radio conversation ended and the security teams began coordinating their withdrawal from the landing zone, Kaya found herself staring up at the mountains that had nearly claimed her life. Somewhere in those peaks, Taliban fighters were probably already planning their next ambush. Other aircraft would face the same deadly game of cat and mouse that she'd survived through skill and luck. But for now, she was on the ground, her crew was safe, and the mission was complete. In the unforgiving calculus of military aviation, that qualified as victory. The debriefing took place in a nondescript tent that had been erected near the landing zone, its canvas walls providing privacy but little comfort. Colonel Mitchell turned out to be a lean, weathered man in his late 40s, with a sort of steady gaze that suggested he'd seen enough combat to understand the difference between heroics and competence. "Lieutenant Thorne," he began, consulting a tablet computer, "I've reviewed your service record. 7 years active duty, spotless safety record, multiple commendations for excellence in challenging conditions. But according to your personnel file, you've been passed over for assignment to Special Operations Units 3 times. Any idea why?" The question was more direct than she'd expected, and probably more honest than most senior officers would be during a formal debriefing. Kaya chose her words carefully. "Sir, I believe some commanders have concerns about integration of female pilots into certain high-risk missions." Mitchell nodded. "Politics. I've seen good pilots sidelined because someone decided that their chromosomes were more important than their flying ability." He set the tablet aside and leaned forward. "Let me be clear about something, Lieutenant. What you did tonight, the tactical decision-making, the aircraft handling, the crew coordination under fire, that's the kind of flying that wins wars. Gender has nothing to do with it." Through the tent walls, Kaya could hear the sounds of helicopters landing and taking off as the evacuation operation continued. Her crew members were already en route to Bagram, where they'd receive proper medical attention and begin the paperwork process that would eventually transform their harrowing experience into official military records. "The intelligence analyst you evacuated," Mitchell continued, "has been working on Taliban communication networks for 18 months. The data he was carrying includes cell phone intercepts, radio frequency analysis, and pattern recognition algorithms that will allow us to predict insurgent movements across 3 provinces. If that information had been captured, we would have lost our intelligence advantage in this entire region." The colonel pulled out a map and spread it across the small table between them. Red pins marked recent Taliban activity, while blue pins showed coalition force positions. The pattern revealed a chess match of movement and counter-movement across hundreds of square miles of mountainous terrain. "Your cargo run wasn't random, Lieutenant. We've been tracking increased Taliban activity in the Gardas region for weeks. Intelligence suggested they were planning something significant, possibly a coordinated attack on multiple forward operating bases. By intercepting their communications tonight, we've confirmed their plans and can take countermeasures." Kaya studied the map, noting the proximity of the Taliban positions to the route she'd flown. "Sir, they knew we were coming. The missile positions were pre-planned, coordinated. This wasn't an opportunistic attack." "Agreed, which raises questions about information security that are above your pay grade." Mitchell's expression darkened. "But it also confirms that your extraction prevented a much larger catastrophe than just losing one aircraft and crew." The tent flap opened, and a communications specialist entered with a message folder. "Sir, priority traffic from CENTCOM. They're requesting a full after-action report within 6 hours." Mitchell accepted the folder but didn't open it immediately. "Lieutenant, I'm going to ask you to do something unusual. I want you to write your own after-action report in your own words, without any input from higher headquarters. Include your tactical assessments, your recommendations for improving aircraft survivability, and your honest opinion about the intelligence leak that nearly got you killed." The request was indeed unusual. Normally, after-action reports were filtered through multiple levels of command, sanitized for political considerations, and edited to support whatever narrative served institutional interests. Being asked to provide an unvarnished account suggested that Colonel Mitchell had concerns beyond the tactical level. "Sir, are you expecting me to contradict the official version of events?" "I'm expecting you to tell the truth, whatever that turns out to be." As the colonel gathered his papers and prepared to leave, Kaya found herself wondering about the larger game being played around her. The precision of the Taliban ambush, the convenient availability of rescue assets, the emphasis on the intelligence analyst's mission, all of it felt choreographed in a way that made her uncomfortable. Colonel, one more question. How did the rescue helicopter know to call me Ghost? That call sign isn't in any official documentation. Mitchell paused at the tent entrance, his hand on the canvas flap. Lieutenant, your reputation in this theater extends far beyond official documentation. The pilots who have worked with you, the ground teams you've supported, the lives you've saved, they talk. Ghost isn't just your call sign, it's your legend. After he left, Kaya sat alone in the tent, surrounded by maps and classified documents that painted a picture of a war more complex than she'd understood. Outside, the sounds of military activity continued as the sun climbed higher over the Hindu Kush mountains. She had a report to write, and for the first time in her career, someone wanted to hear what she actually thought rather than what she was supposed to think. The flight back to Bagram took place 36 hours later, after maintenance crews had patched 17 holes, replaced damaged hydraulic lines, and pronounced the C-130 airworthy despite looking like it had been through a blender. Kaya performed the most thorough pre-flight inspection of her career, checking every rivet, every control surface, every system twice before signing off on the aircraft's condition. Her new co-pilot was Captain Lisa Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed transport pilot who'd heard about the mission through the aviation grapevine and requested the assignment. "They're calling it the Hindu Kush miracle," Rodriguez said as they completed their pre-flight checks. "Word is you threaded that aircraft through a missile barrage like it was a training exercise." "It wasn't that clean," Kaya replied, uncomfortable with the mythology already growing around the incident. "We got lucky, several times." But Rodriguez wasn't buying the modesty. "Ghost, I've read the missile tracking data from ground radar. The Taliban fired 6 SA-7s at you from 3 different positions. The intercept probabilities should have been 97%. The fact that you're here means you did something that the math says was impossible." The engine spun up with reassuring smoothness, and Kaya taxied the patched aircraft toward the runway. Despite the repairs, she could feel subtle differences in the way it handled, a slight vibration in the controls, a tendency to pull left during turns. Battle damage left scars that went beyond what maintenance crews could fix. Bagram Tower, Angel 7 ready for departure. Angel 7 Bagram Tower, you're cleared for takeoff. Fly safe out there, Ghost. Even air traffic control was using the call sign now. Kaya wondered how long it would be before her real name disappeared entirely, subsumed into whatever legend the military rumor mill was constructing around her mission. The C-130 lifted off smoothly and climbed toward cruising altitude, leaving the Hindu Kush mountains behind in the morning haze. From altitude, the terrain looked deceptively peaceful, rolling brown hills dotted with ancient villages that had seen empires rise and fall for millennia. No indication of the missiles, ambushes, and deadly games being played in the valleys below. "Ghost, you've got a priority message from Colonel Mitchell," Rodriguez announced, consulting her communications panel. "He wants you to report to his office immediately upon arrival at Bagram." Kaya acknowledged the message but felt a knot forming in her stomach. Priority meetings with senior officers could mean recognition, reassignment, or trouble. Given the political complexities surrounding her mission, any of those outcomes seemed possible. 2 hours later, the C-130 touched down at Bagram Airfield, completing what would officially be recorded as a routine transport mission. The reality was somewhat different. A cargo run that had become a combat survival story, flown by a pilot whose reputation had transformed overnight from competent but overlooked to legendary. As they taxied toward the parking ramp, Kaya could see an unusual amount of activity around their designated spot. Ground crews, security personnel, and what appeared to be several senior officers were waiting for their arrival. Either she was about to receive commendation for exceptional performance, or someone had decided that her version of events needed to be managed more carefully. "Rodriguez, after we shut down, I want you to secure all our flight data, navigation logs, and communications recordings. Make copies and store them separately. Her co-pilot's expression grew serious, expecting trouble, expecting politics, which is usually worse. The C-130's engines wound down as Kaya completed her post-flight procedures with methodical precision. Through the cockpit windows, she could see Colonel Mitchell approaching with two other officers she didn't recognize, both wearing the kind of serious expressions that suggested this conversation would be more complicated than a simple debriefing. Whatever came next, she'd meet it the same way she'd met the missiles over the Hindu Kush, with professional competence and stubborn determination to see her mission through to completion. But first, she had to find out exactly what her mission had become. Colonel Mitchell's office occupied a corner of a prefabricated building that housed the Joint Task Force command structure, its walls lined with maps, operational charts, and the kind of classified information that reminded visitors they were in a war zone. The two officers accompanying him turned out to be Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Patterson from Air Force Special Operations Command and Major David Kim from Military Intelligence. "Lieutenant Thorne," Mitchell began, gesturing toward a chair across from his desk, "I've had some interesting conversations about your mission over the past day and a half. It seems your flight has attracted attention at levels well above my authority." Patterson leaned forward, her expression businesslike but not unfriendly. "Lieutenant, I've reviewed your service record and your after-action report. Both are impressive. AFSOC has been looking for pilots with your skill set for advanced insertion and extraction missions." "Ma'am, I appreciate the consideration, but I'm not sure I understand why my transport flight has generated special operations interest." Major Kim opened a folder and consulted several documents. "Lieutenant, your aircraft was carrying more than medical supplies and standard cargo. The intelligence analyst you evacuated was transporting data related to Operation Silent Thunder, a classified program targeting Taliban communication networks. The information he carried was time-sensitive and mission-critical." The pieces were starting to fit together in ways that made Kaya uncomfortable. "Sir, are you saying my cargo mission was cover for intelligence transport?" "Not cover," Mitchell interjected. "Dual purpose. We needed medical supplies delivered to Viper, and we needed intelligence data extracted from the region. Combining the missions made tactical sense and provided operational security for the intelligence component." Patterson pulled out another set of documents. "What we didn't anticipate was the sophistication of the Taliban response. The coordinated missile attack suggests they had advanced knowledge of your flight plan, timing, and route. That level of intelligence indicates either exceptional reconnaissance capability or information from inside our operational security perimeter." The implications were disturbing. If the Taliban had penetrated coalition communications or had sources inside the planning structure, then every mission was potentially compromised. Worse, if they deliberately used her flight as bait to test Taliban capabilities, then she and her crew had been expendable assets in a larger intelligence operation. "Ma'am, with respect, it sounds like you're describing a situation where my crew and I were placed at risk to serve intelligence objectives we weren't briefed about." Kim's expression remained neutral. "Lieutenant, every mission in this theater serves multiple objectives. Your primary mission was supply delivery, which you accomplished. The intelligence transport was secondary, classified, and handled through compartmented security protocols. And if we'd been shot down, if the intelligence had been captured along with our bodies, that was considered an acceptable risk given the importance of the data and your demonstrated flying ability," Patterson replied. "The decision was made at the highest levels based on threat assessment and pilot qualifications." Kaya felt a familiar anger building, the same frustration she'd experienced throughout her career when discovering that decisions affecting her life had been made by people who would never face the consequences. She'd been selected for this mission not because she was expendable, but because someone had calculated that her skills gave the operation the best chance of success. "I assume you're here to offer me something," she said, deciding to cut through the diplomatic language. Mitchell smiled grimly. "Direct. I like that. Yes, Lieutenant, we have a proposition. AFSOC wants to offer you assignment to a classified unit conducting high-risk insertion and extraction missions. The work would be dangerous, the security requirements absolute, and the recognition non-existent. But you'd be flying missions that could significantly impact the war effort. And if I decline? Then you continue flying transport missions, probably for the remainder of your deployment. Your service record will reflect exceptional performance under fire, and your career will proceed normally." Patterson added, "But Lieutenant, pilots with your demonstrated capabilities under combat stress are rare. The missions we're discussing would utilize your skills in ways that standard transport flying never could." Through the office windows, Kaya could see C-130s landing and taking off in the constant rhythm of military air operations. Standard missions, routine cargo runs, the unglamorous work that kept armies supplied and functional. Important work, but not the kind that would challenge her abilities or make use of the skills she demonstrated over the Hindu Kush. "I'll need time to consider the offer." "Understood," Mitchell replied. "Take 72 hours. But Lieutenant, whatever you decide, I want you to know that what you accomplished out there was extraordinary. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." As the meeting concluded and she walked back across the airfield, Kaya found herself weighing career possibilities against personal principles. The Special Operations assignment would represent recognition of her abilities and a chance to fly missions that mattered. But it would also mean accepting that she'd been deliberately placed at risk for classified objectives she'd never been told about. The choice would define not just her immediate future, but her understanding of her place in an institution that she'd served faithfully for 7 years. By evening, word of the Special Operations offer had somehow reached the other pilots in her squadron, and Kaya found herself the center of attention in the officers' club for the first time since arriving in Afghanistan. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms, and she could feel the weight of speculation and